We all have this image of Germany's WWII Panzer divisions, right? This unstoppable iron tide. But what if their biggest enemy wasn't an anti-tank gun, but just a simple wrench? Today we're digging into the unseen war of maintenance, a crisis of nuts, bolts, and spare parts that literally brought the German war machine to a grinding halt.
So, let me ask you, what was the German army's most powerful weapon in World War II? You're probably thinking of the Tiger tank, right? Or maybe the super advanced Panther, or maybe even the idea of Blitzkrieg itself. And yeah, those are all good answers, but the real answer, the most powerful weapon they had, was something else entirely. You got it. For a little while, Germany's greatest weapon wasn't a tank at all. It was the incredible system they designed to keep those tanks fighting. But here's the thing. It was a system built with one single, absolutely fatal flaw. And if you want to understand what happened on the Eastern Front, you have to understand that flaw.
Okay, so in the beginning, the Germans had what looked like a perfect plan. Their maintenance system was ruthlessly efficient, it was incredibly organized, and it was tailor-made for the kind of war they thought they were going to fight. Short, sharp, and most importantly, close to home. The whole idea was called centralized maintenance, and it was actually pretty simple. You see, the mechanics in the field, they only handled the small stuff, quick fixes to get a tank rolling again. But for anything serious, any major damage, that tank was loaded onto a train and shipped all the way back to its original factory in Germany for a complete overhaul. It's a brilliant idea, as long as the factory is just a short train ride away.
And early on, it worked like a dream. In Poland, in France, in the Balkans, all those campaigns were over so fast that entire armored divisions could just pack up and go home to Germany. There, the factory crews would get to work, restoring every single vehicle to perfect condition. It was fast, it was thorough, and it meant they can get a top-notch fighting force back in the field in record time.
But then came June of 1941, and this perfectly tuned system ran headfirst into a brick wall, and that wall was called Russia. The invasion of the Soviet Union was about to stretch this system and really the entire German army way past its breaking point.
Just look at this map. It really puts the challenge into perspective, doesn't it? Poland and France were practically fought in Germany's backyard, but the Eastern Front, that was a whole different beast. Suddenly, sending a tank back to the factory wasn't a quick trip anymore. It was a logistical nightmare across thousands of kilometers of hostile land.
And it wasn't just about the distance. The whole system just crumbled under a ton of other problems. You had the brutal Russian winter freezing engine solid, and then summer dust would just choke them. Combat losses were way heavier than anything they'd seen before. The roads, the railways, they were primitive, and often the retreating Soviets blew them up anyway. This wasn't a quick campaign. This was total war, and that centralized system just couldn't handle it.
So faced with a total disaster, the German army had to do what armies do best, improvise. They couldn't send tanks home anymore. They had to figure out a way to do those complex, factory-level repairs right there, in the middle of the mud and snow of the front lines.
Their new strategy was all about one word: decentralization. The logic was simple. If you can't bring the tank to the factory, well, you're going to have to bring the factory to the tank. And that meant creating a whole new structure of mobile repair units that had the tools and the skills to fix pretty much anything themselves.
So, how did this mobile factory actually work? Well, it started with the smallest unit, the Tank Maintenance Detachment. You can think of these guys as the battlefield medics for tanks. These were small 19-man teams that were right there with the tank companies, handling any quick repairs. We're talking anything that took less than half a day, right there on the spot.
Now, for the bigger jobs, the tank would get sent up the chain to the Tank Maintenance Company. This was a much bigger deal. We're talking up to 200 guys, and it was basically a mobile field hospital for armor. They had specialized teams for engines, for welding, for recovery. It was a full-service garage operating just behind the front.
So, the new process was actually pretty straightforward. A tank gets hit, the little detachment team shows up and takes a look. If it's a quick fix, they do it right then and there. If it's a major surgery, like swapping out an entire engine, the tank gets towed back to the big company workshop. It was a really smart adaptation, but it created an even bigger problem.
You see, you can have the best mechanics in the entire world, but you can't fix a tank if you don't have the parts. And Germany was about to walk right into an unsolvable crisis in its supply chain, one that would cripple its Panzer divisions for the rest of the war.
This was the impossible choice that German industry was facing. With their limited industrial capacity, they had two options: They could use their factories to build brand new tanks to replace the ones they were losing, or they could use those same assembly lines to make a constant stream of spare parts. What they couldn't do was both.
This quote from the source material just says it all. Germany's industry just wasn't big enough to build new tanks and enough spare parts simultaneously. And faced with that choice, the government consistently chose new tanks, basically ignoring the spare parts problem until, as the report says, irreparable damage had been done.
The result on the front lines was, well, predictable chaos. Cannibalization became the norm. You'd strip 2 broken tanks just to make 1 working one. Units started hoarding parts. The source even talks about fierce struggles at supply depots where different units were literally fighting each other for parts. It was a total free-for-all.
And you can just watch the crisis get worse and worse over time. By summer of '42, the shortage was so bad it was paralyzing operations. The whole situation got completely absurd. In early '43, an entire fleet of brand new Panther tanks had to be pulled from the front because of design flaws and 0 spare parts. And then you have the mighty Tiger tanks arriving with only 1 spare engine for every 10 tanks. They were incredible machines, but they were basically unfixable.
So, after all that, what are the lessons here? Well, Germany's nightmare with tank maintenance actually provides some of the most important lessons in modern military logistics, lessons written in grease and steel. The German experience really boils down to 4 key principles. First, maintenance is combat power. Simple as that. Second, you have to train your mechanics before the war starts, not in the middle of it. Third, and this is a big one, simplicity is a weapon. Germany had this zoo of different tank models, and it was a complete nightmare for spare parts. And finally, you have to design a weapon for easy repair from the very beginning.
But if there is one single statistic that sums up this entire story, that tells you everything you need to know, it's this one: 7 out of 10. And here is the final brutal irony. The huge majority of repairs weren't even complicated. They didn't need heavy machinery or expert welders. 70% of the time, a disabled German tank just needed a new part bolted on. That's it. Most of those broken down Panzers could have been back in the fight in hours, if only they'd had the part.
It all leaves us with a really fundamental question, doesn't it? Germany built some of the most technologically advanced weapons of the entire war. But this whole story shows that the most brilliant weapon in the world is useless without the system to keep it running. So what's more important to winning a war? Having the best weapon or having the best system to keep that weapon in the fight?